probably hate paying tax, especially when you don't have to, but did you know that most people could easily cut down their tax bill if they did some research? That means less money leaving your pay slips and more money coming into your pocket. I've given a TEDx talk on money and written about personal finance for the Financial Times, and I see people throwing money away that they could be keeping in their own pocket. There's nothing worse than seeing people pay tax when they don't have to, and I once spoke to a man who had a stock portfolio of more than £600,000, but absolutely none of it was protected by tax. And that meant that he was having to pay capital gains tax every year on his profits because he missed out on one key tax-free account. It's called an individual savings account, or an ISA, and the first thing you absolutely need to do is start taking advantage of your ISA allowance. Now, you can pay £20,000 into a single stocks and shares ISA, and what this does is mean that any profits that you make within the ISA are completely tax-free. You don't even need to declare it to HMRC. So that means you can make $1 million inside your ISA, then just transfer it to your bank account, and the government doesn't even have to know. Now, you might get a few questions from your bank if £1 million just appears in your bank account one day, but that's certainly a nice problem to have. By the way, you're going to want to stay to the end of this video because I'll show you how to use a little known ISA hack. That means you can avoid losing your tax-free allowance completely. But first, as well as the stocks and shares ISA, there's also something called a lifetime ISA, or the LISA, and this is the best kept secret in UK investing because only around 8% of the country that are eligible actually have one, and the LISA has an allowance of £4,000, which is within the ISA allowance, but here's the kicker: the government tops up whatever you put into this account by 25%, so that means you can actually get £1,000 free every year just by paying into the LISA. However, not anyone can open a LISA. You do need to be between the ages of 18 and 39 in order to open one, and you can keep getting the 25% bonus until you are 50. And there are some disadvantages to the LISA because you can only withdraw from it without incurring a penalty once you're 60 years old. But if you're buying your first home, you can cash your LISA out, or if you're terminally ill, then you can also withdraw early without a penalty. And one of the great things about the LISA is that it gives you 25% guaranteed returns every year, and you can even juice those returns up by investing in the stock market by picking a low-cost ETF tracker fund. I'd recommend the S&P 500 ETF here because it's got some of the biggest and best companies in the world, such as Apple, Amazon, Alphabet, Meta and Netflix, but you can also go for a world tracker or an investment product that suits your needs. If you wanted to be risk averse, then you could just invest your bonus. That way the amount that you put into the LISA would never go down, but equities have always outperformed cash in the long run, so my suggestion would be to invest it all. Obviously, that's not advice. So as well as your ISA allowance, if you've filled up your ISA, you can take advantage of your capital gains tax allowance, which is currently £6,000 for the tax year 23 to 24, but it does drop next year to £3,000 from April 6th, 2024. And what that means is you can make up to £6,000 in profits before you have to pay any capital gains tax. Obviously, your goal should be to fill up your ISA first because all of that is then tax-free in the tax-free wrapper forever. But if you have investments outside of an ISA, you can make £6,000 this tax year and £3,000 the next before you'd need to declare it on your tax return to HMRC. Another way I see people paying more tax is because they're not paying attention to their pre-tax earnings and all the tools that you can use in order to pay less tax. Lots of people are surprised when I tell them that they can reduce the current tax bill and even get free money from the government, and the way to do that is to make use of your pension allowance. This amounts to £60,000 per year, which you can contribute towards your pension, and it will come off your taxable earnings. Plus, the government will actually give you a boost here. So if you earn up to £50,270, every 80 pence you pay will get topped up to £1, and anyone earning over this amount will get 40% tax relief as a higher rate taxpayer, and anyone earning over £150,000 gets 45% tax relief. So it's definitely worth thinking about the future when it comes to pensions, because Not only do you pay less tax, but you also get free money from the government too. Now, it does get taxed at the other end when you start to withdraw your pension, but you can withdraw 25% of it tax-free, and then it'll be taxed as income. But you are getting the benefit of compounding that money and delaying the taxation, which means it has the potential to grow into a much bigger pile. You also have the benefit of paying up to 3 years back, so you can actually pay a lot more than £60,000 into a pension if you're able to. Don't neglect your pension, because it is one of the best ways to get around paying tax. Got kids? Well, consider a junior ISA, because like your stocks and shares ISA, all profits are tax-free. Obviously, they won't be your profits and they'll be your children's, but you can transfer in £9,000 per tax year for them to get their own investment pots and nest eggs started. Again, the rule is to use it or lose it when it comes to JISAs, and once they turn 18, that money is legally theirs. So whilst it's great to save for them, it does mean that that hard money that you've been carefully saving for the last 18 years could now get splurged on cheap vodka, a trip to Magaluf, and a new car that'll depreciate faster than a teenage girl's bank account when Taylor Swift tickets are released. Now, if you want to avoid that problem, the next thing you can use is a junior SIPP, and this means they can only get access to the money once they retire, which in the current state will be many years away. And given the current state pension sucks and is likely going to get worse as we live for longer and have less children, this isn't a bad idea if you want to avoid your child blowing the money once they've turned 18. You can transfer in £3,600 per child, and this is just like your pension allowance. It gets taxed at the end, so you have many years of compounding ahead. If your parents are stinking rich, then make sure you show them this video, because you can also make use of their inheritance tax allowance, and this means that you can gift your children £3,000 in cash every year without it being liable for inheritance tax allowance, which kicks in at £325,000 at a 40% rate, assuming it doesn't carry over to the spouse. And if it does carry over, then that means the estate can be up to £650,000, at which every £1 above that is taxed at 40% when it's bequeathed to the children. So if your estate is likely to be worth more than £325,000 by the time you die, or £650,000 if you're married, then it's time to start thinking of giving your children some pocket money. Then there's a personal allowance, which means you can earn up to £12,570 before you need to pay any income tax or national insurance on earnings. Make sure, if you're a limited company director, that you're taking advantage of this and then paying yourself dividends above this. And if you're retired, then remember you can still earn up to this amount tax-free before you'd enter the 20% tax rate. You've also got the dividend allowance, which means you can take £1,000 of dividends outside of an ISA or a pension. So if you have a general investment account where you're receiving dividends, you don't need to declare them to HMRC unless they're over £1,000, at which point they will be taxable, and the rate will depend on how much you earn. You can also take it as a dividend from your own limited company, which means you get another £1,000 in earnings tax-free on top of your personal allowance, bringing the total then to £13,570. And finally, you've got the trading allowance or the side hustle allowance, which is an allowable £1,000 outside of your regular employment, and that means you can Airbnb your house or wheel and deal Pokemon cards online before you actually have to think about declaring it to HMRC. This is great because if you are thinking of doing a side hustle, you can at least have paying customers and prove out the business model before you have to think about things like paying tax. And finally, we've got the ISA hack I mentioned earlier, a way to avoid losing your allowance and carrying it over. What you need to do is find a stocks and shares Flexi-ISA, and I use IG for this, and I've included a link below. And what you need to do is deposit however much you want to carry over on the last day of the tax year. Then in the new tax year, you withdraw the same amount again. And what happens here, because you've got a Flexi-ISA, anything you withdraw in the current tax year, you can replace. So you've now got whatever you withdrew to replace, plus your additional new £20,000 ISA allowance because you carried it over. However, make sure your ISA provider is a flexible ISA, because not all of them are. And again, I've put a link to IG's ISA below the video. Let me know if you found any other ways to reduce tax, or if you have any questions on ISAs, and a like and subscribe are appreciated because it helps me and the channel out. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.